Hi, everyone. Today's webinar is titled FDA Drug Topics, National Drug Code, NDC for Healthcare Providers. My name is Dr. Kara Burke, a pharmacist and team leader in the Division of Drug Information. I would like to welcome you to this educational activity sponsored by the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, Office of Communications, Division of Drug Information. We thank you and appreciate your patience as we continue to offer these CE courses completely virtual. If you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at ddiwebinars@fda.hhs.gov for direct assistance. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a few housekeeping remarks. All faculty are expected to use generic names. If trade names are used, those of several companies should be used rather than only that of a single supporting company. Unapproved use disclosure. CE faculty speakers are required to disclose to the attendees when products or procedures being discussed are off-label, unlabeled, not FDA approved, and any limitations on the information that is presented. Disclosure. The faculty's planning committee members and the FDA CE consultation and accreditation team have nothing to disclose. We hope you will enjoy meeting our presenter today. Dr. Leila Raju Esfandiari is the branch chief for the Drug Registration and Listing Branch in the Office of Unapproved Drugs and Labeling Compliance. She started her FDA career with Drug Registration and Listing, or DRLS, in 2008, and later helped create the DRLS Compliance Program in 2015. She earned her PharmD degree from Tehran University School of Medical Science in Iran in 1996 and has a certificate degree in American course on drug development and regulatory sciences from the University of California, San Francisco. She has worked in retail pharmacy and hospital settings prior to joining the federal government. She's a subject matter expert in data integrity, compliance, and NDC. Now, please give a warm online welcome to Dr. Raju Esfandiari.
Thank you, Dr. Burke, for the introduction. It's always a pleasure to work with all our amazing colleagues in the Division of Drug Information, CDER. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the FDA Drug Topics series to learn more about the National Drug Code, or the NDC. I hope whether you are familiar with the NDC on your day-to-day work or not, you walk away from this presentation learning something new. As mentioned, we are offering 1 CE credit once you complete this presentation, and as part of the process during this presentation, we will discuss the history of NDC and its assignment, learn about NDC formats and its placement on drug labels, what to do if you find an incorrect data on FDA publications, and get a sense of what may be coming in the future. To begin, let's try to read this statement. This is a pharmacist way of saying that humans are smarter than computer systems, so you are all smarter than computer systems. It shows how important identifiers really are. Scanning an incorrect barcode can return the wrong drug, even if humans can tell the difference using additional information at their disposal. So, digital identifiers are typically a string of numeric or alphanumeric characters that uniquely identify a product or a person in these examples. A couple of day-to-day examples are our social security numbers, which identify John Doe, for example. It is a numeric identifier divided by hyphens, as you see in the picture, or a VIN number that identifies a certain car and is a longer string with alphanumeric characters in this example. Similar to cars in humans, drugs are assigned unique identifiers, such as National Drug Code in the US and Drug Identification Number in Canada. Identifiers can be global or regional. The global ones aim typically for global harmonization, and the regional ones are used in one geographical region that uses specific digital systems. In the United States, drugs are uniquely identified by the National Drug Code, or NDC. NDC is a numeric code divided by hyphens. It is 10 digits and consists of 3 segments. The labeler code, which is assigned by FDA and identifies the entity manufacturing or distributing the drug. The product code, which is proposed by the labeler and identifies a specific drug. And the package code, which is also proposed by the labeler and identifies a package size or type of that specific drug. As you see in this example, you see an NDC in a 442 format. The labeler code is assigned to XYZ Pharma. It is assigned by FDA. The product code identifies drug ABC 20 milligram tablet, and it's proposed by XYZ Pharma or the entity that submits the drug listing for XYZ Pharma. And the package code identifies a bottle of 100 for drug ABC 20 milligram tablets. And again, proposed by XYZ Pharma or its representative. NDC currently exists in 3 different formats: the 442, the 532, and the 541. This is what you currently find on a drug label that includes an NDC. Once the company manufacturing or distributing the drug lists the drug for the first time and proposes a certain format, its NDC format for all its drug listing under that labeler code remains the same format and cannot change. At the same time, the NDC entered for billing and maintained in some databases outside of FDA add a leading 0 to the short segment to create a one format NDC. This is called the 542. This format was later mentioned for the first time in a regulation in the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. As mentioned, the FDA NDC 10 is converted to the HIPAA standard NDC 11 by adding a leading 0 to the short segment. It can get more complicated when the HIPAA standard NDC 11 is converted back to the official NDC, especially if the database maintains and stores the 11-digit NDC without the hyphens. As you see in this example provided on the slide, a HIPAA NDC 11 can be potentially translated to 3 different NDCs if the hyphens are not included. In healthcare, NDC is widely used in different areas. A physician or nurse practitioner prescribing a medication for a patient, a pharmacist or pharmacy technician filling the physician order, who is actively using NDC to fulfill the physician order, dispense the medication, and process medical billing. Insurance industry and Medicare and Medicaid programs require NDC for accurate reimbursement. In clinics, hospitals, and pharmacies, NDCs are directly used for ordering and inventory management. Automated systems in these settings often check NDCs to check inventory and restock drugs. NDCs are used extensively to ensure drug distribution and supply chain security to track the flow of drugs through the supply chain. The NDC ensures that drugs are accurately tracked from the manufacturer to the point of sale. In other programs, it is used in drug importation, recalls, and effectively reporting adverse events and safety concerns to the agency. It is used by industry, whole range of government agencies, research, and academia. In short, NDC is a critical element in managing healthcare in the United States. But where does that drug data, including NDC, actually come from? Drug manufacturers that are in the United States and manufacture drugs for commercial distribution, or foreign drug manufacturers that import or offered for import drugs into the United States are required to register as a drug establishment with the FDA and submit a list of each and every drug they manufacture for commercial distribution in the United States. As part of the data required for this drug listing submission, drug manufacturers are required to propose an NDC that includes all package code variations. The inclusion of NDC in a drug listing submission to FDA was enacted through the Drug Listing Act in 1972. In fact, let's take a history walk down the NDC road. There is a lot of information on this slide, and I will try my best to expand on each here. First, in 1969, NDC started as voluntary reporting and was in a 342 format. Very quickly, the agency realized that a 3-digit labeler code will run out very quickly. So with the Drug Listing Act of 1972, NDC became a 442 format and was mandated for drug listing submissions to FDA via paper forms. Later, when FDA ran out of the 4-digit labeler codes, it started assigning 5-digit labeler codes. And in order to keep the NDC at 10 digits, it created the new formats, the 541 and the 532. In 1974, the Uniform Grocery Code Council, or UGCC, introduced 12-digit UPC and barcodes. The Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990 required an NDC to bill drugs for Medicaid paid programs, and in 1996, HIPAA adopted the 11-digit format already used by the payer industry in an attempt to standardize various NDC formats. In 2004, the barcode rule required linear barcode on all drugs with an effective date of 2006. The Food and Drug Administration Amendment Act, or FDAA, of 2007 developed the standard numerical identifier to help secure the drug supply chain by identifying, authenticating, and tracking prescription drugs. The term standardized numerical identifier means a set of numbers or characters used to uniquely identify each package or homogeneous case that is composed of the national drug code that corresponds to the specific product, combined with a unique alphanumeric serial number of up to 20 characters. In 2009, FDA started the electronic registration and listing submission, including NDC. And in June of 2009, FDA stopped accepting the old paper forms. Drug Supply Chain Security Act passed in 2013, which required the 2D matrix barcode to trace prescription drugs. In 2016, the regulations for establishment registration and drug listing requirements under 21 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 207, was revised. One big revision was that an NDC previously assigned to a different drug cannot be reused. Prior to 2016, firms were able to reuse an NDC previously assigned to a drug 5 years after its discontinuation. But with the effective date of August 2017, that practice stopped and firms were not able to reuse an NDC any longer, unless the exact same drug was introduced back in the market after it was discontinued. Another revision was that the NDC changed from an alphanumeric code to a numeric code based on safety concerns reported to FDA. At the same time, other NDC provisions remained the same. That meant once the agency ran out of 5-digit labeler codes, it would start assigning 6-digit labeler codes. As a result, FDA held a public hearing in 2018 to gather information on concerns over this upcoming change and proposed a revision to the NDC regulations in 2022. Most drug labels include an NDC. The NDC appears on the upper part of the drug label and includes the prefix NDC. The inclusion of NDC on drug label is requested but not required per labeling requirements. NDC is typically included on prescription drug label or principal display panel for identification and billing. but it is required to be included in the health supplied section of the prescription drug labeling anyway. NDC is also required to be part of the barcode, and barcode is required to be included in the drug label. So even if you don't see a human readable format NDC on a drug's principal display panel, the NDC would be embedded in the barcode. For this prescription drug label, the NDC is printed on the drug label, as you can see on the upper left side, and is included in the barcode. This prescription includes a linear barcode and a 2D data matrix barcode. The NDC can be harvested from the linear barcode if it was also not printed on the label. Scanning machines used to scan a drug label are able to read the NDC within the barcode, both the linear and the 2D data matrix barcodes. As you see on the right side on the slide, in section 16 of a prescription drug labeling within the package insert, all NDCs and packaging description associated with the drug must be included. So things are a bit different for OTC drug label, could be a little different for an OTC drug label. For example, did you know antiseptic mouthwashes, anti-dandruff shampoos, and fluoride toothpaste are typically drugs? You may not find an NDC in human readable format on their label for these products in your retail pharmacy or grocery store, but you can try to find them embedded in the barcode, as shown here on this slide. Generally speaking, lack of NDC on a product label does not mean it is not a drug. All drugs in U.S. commercial distribution must be listed with FDA, and NDC, as mentioned, is a required data element for drug listing. This means a listed drug will be assigned an NDC, but the assigned NDC may not be included in a human readable format on its label. NDC must be assigned to all drugs, including human or animal, prescription or OTC, and approved or unapproved drugs. Additionally, inclusion of NDC on a product label does not mean the product is a drug or it is legally marketed in the United States. The hint is in the name, the National Drug Code. It should not be assigned to any product that is not a drug. That includes dietary supplements and medical devices. In fact, a product may be deemed to be misbranded if an NDC is included on its labeling, but the product is not a drug. Under FDA's 21 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 20777B, any representation that creates the impression that a drug is approved or is legally marketable because it appears in our database of drugs, has been assigned or displays an NDC, or the establishment has been assigned an establishment registration number or unique facility identifier, is misleading and constitutes misbranding. In other words, registration and listing with FDA does not mean that FDA has made a determination that your product is a drug or you're allowed to manufacture or distribute that drug in the US. Part of the NDC regulations describes conditions under which the NDC assigned to a drug must change. If a drug's established name or proprietary name changes, or there are any changes to the active ingredient or ingredients, strength or strengths, dosage form, the product code assigned to the drug must change. When a drug status switches from a prescription to OTC, a new NDC is required to be assigned that is different at the product code level. Additionally, if any physical characteristic of a drug changes, a new product code is required to be assigned. For example, a tablet with a new scoring, a new shape, a new color, or an elixir with a different taste cannot be assigned the same product code. A package code must be different for different packaging sizes or types of a specific drug. For example, bottles of 30 and 100 counts of a drug or a plastic and glass container of an IV drug cannot be assigned the same package code. If the NDC is not assigned correctly, it can create several concerns. For example, if different strengths of an injectable pen are assigned the same product code, it creates major safety concerns because patients can be dispensed or administered the wrong dose. A change in the product code segment when physical characteristics of a drug change will increase patient compliance because the pharmacist is able to identify the change and alert the patient at the time of dispensing. If you ever use the great services that poison control centers provide, you are asked to provide those physical characteristics to identify the drug. Poison control centers use the description of those characteristics, amongst other information, to correctly identify the drug. On the other hand, if the package code is not assigned correctly, insurance may be billed for the wrong quantity, which can lead to incorrect billing and reimbursement issues. The listing data, including the NDC, is provided online in several publications. The first one is the NDC directory that is maintained by FDA. It is updated daily on working weekdays from listing submissions to the agency. It includes finished and unfinished human drugs in 2 separate sections, but it does not include labeling. DailyMed includes labeling for human and animal drugs. It is managed by the National Institute of Health, but it receives the data from the same listing submissions to FDA daily, again on working weekdays. It is worth mentioning that there are other FDA and government publications that use the listing data to display labeling, including the NDC. One example is the FDA Label Repository, which is not maintained by our group. Outside of the government, drug data banks also use this information in addition to other resources to publish their data. So occasionally and unfortunately, you will find errors in these publications. These are errors introduced at the time of listing submissions by firms. Although FDA has put in place numerous automated validation procedures which prevent certain errors, it cannot stop all errors from submission. For example, a computer system can detect and validate the NDC length and format automatically. It can also detect the submission of a JPEG file for the principal display panel as a part of required labeling submission. But currently, it cannot validate if the JPEG file is actually a representation of the listed drug label. Maybe with the AI help in the future, we can actually detect that part also automatically in the future. But as of now, you may find, very hopefully rarely, labels that do not represent a listed drug, and that is a major concern for FDA. If you see any errors in any of our online publications, for example, a labeling issue, if you are holding a roundtable, for example, but DailyMed includes a caplet, you can contact us, you can contact our group at our general email address at edrls@fda.hhs.gov and provide the information. According to current regulations, FDA will start assigning 6-digit labeler codes once it runs out of 5-digit labeler codes. It is estimated that we may have 10 to 15 years till then. As we experienced with the COVID pandemic, we run out actually faster than 15 years. That's why we don't have an exact number. If nothing changes, this means that 2 new formats will be introduced, the 632 and the 641. There will be an FDA NDC 10, an FDA NDC 11, expanding FDA NDCs to 5 formats, in addition to HIPAA NDC 11 and anything else that might be adopted by HIPAA and others outside FDA. To address this issue, FDA published a Federal Register notice and suggested 4 possible options. Option A, maintaining current practice without any modification. So basically, we wait to run out of 5-digit labeler codes and start assigning 6-digit labeler codes and have 5 different FDA NDC formats. Option B was the same as option A, but transitioning on a specific date in the future to add more certainty. Option C was for FDA to adopt the 11-digit HIPAA format and transition to 12 digits later once we run out of 5-digit labeler codes. And option D was harmonizing NDC by adopting a 12-digit 642 format. A public hearing was held on November 5, 2018, where several stakeholders presented to the audience and an FDA panel. Based on the presentations and comments, FDA published a proposed rule on July 22, 2022, proposing option D to move to a 12-digit one-format NDC in the future, and is currently working on finalizing the rule. So as for the takeaway, NDC is the major drug identifier in United States. It is proposed by firms at the time of drug listing and gets assigned by FDA. As a result, since all drugs in U.S. commercial distribution must be listed with FDA, they all must be assigned an NDC. But that doesn't mean that FDA has made a determination that the product is a drug or is legally marketed. You may find the NDC on a drug's principal display panel in a human readable format or not, and NDC length and format may change in the future. I provided a list of some of the resources that were mentioned in this presentation, and you can find them by clicking on each of the links provided here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or our general email address, which is edrls@fda.hhs.gov, which we have several wonderful colleagues that are available to assist you with your registration and listing questions or with NDC assignment or NDC questions. To close, correct NDC assignment and use is essential to patient safety and healthcare administration. Follow FDA announcements to learn about its future format. Thank you for your participation and attention.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Raju Asfanyari. This concludes the presentation portion of our webinar. First question, what are international NDC requirements for manufacturers outside of US or online pharmacies that import medications?
First of all, pharmacies, the practice of pharmacy, and I have to point out that some practices incorrectly refer themselves as a pharmacy, but let's say in this case, this is an actual pharmacy. And if they are not manufacturing any drugs, they are not subject to registration and listing requirements themselves. If you are importing drugs into US, however, that drug needs to be listed with FDA, and whoever manufactures it has to be registered with FDA, whether inside or outside of the US. So you are probably, if you are an online pharmacy, you are probably the importer of record for that particular drug, and the drug has to be registered and listed. There are certain importation requirements for drugs which we cannot get into in this presentation because it's outside of this discussion, but you can definitely look into that. But in terms of the NDC requirements, in terms of the registration and listing requirements, the same thing applies. Maybe not to you, but to the company that manufactures the drug and distributes it here in the US.
Right, thank you so much, Layla. The next question, what is the benefit for some products where the 25 count box has one NDC and then the individual vials have a different NDC?
So based on the regulations, the NDC assigned to, let's say, you're talking about a box that has 25 like vials in it, right? The box itself is a different package size and type. So you're looking at a box of 25 vials. The box has to have a different package code, and each individual vial has to have a different NDC package code. So when you're, for example, dispensing a vial, there is a difference between what you are actually dispensing when you use the package code for the box or for the vial. And so therefore it's billed and dispensed correctly.
Thank you, Layla. We have a lot of good ones coming in, trying to keep up. All right, next one. You said FDA is working on standardizing the 642 format. Would this mean we would have only one single format? This would be ideal.
So I want to emphasize that what we discussed here is about a proposed rule. So the way regulations work is that the federal agencies, in this case, we saw an issue. We had a public hearing. We heard from stakeholders, and we then published a proposed rule. So there has to be a proposed rule where people comment on, and that happened in 2022. We received the comments. We are working on finalizing it. So a rule is not going to be in effect until it's finalized. And it doesn't mean it will be finalized exactly the same way it was proposed, because again, it has to, the federal agencies, again, have to open the docket for comments, receive the comments, and respond to those comments. And if needed, revise the proposal in the final rule. So we're working on it. We're hoping to finalize it soon, but once finalized, then we will know exactly what's going to happen. At this point, as proposed, yes, that is the intention. That was the intention at the time of proposal, that we move, at least FDA moves to the 6421 format NDC. And whether or not if others also follow, as I said, the payer industry, for example, is using an 11-digit NDC right now. That is like up to the payer industry, whether if they move also to the same exact standard. But the proposal is that we move to a 642 format currently. So stay tuned for the final rule. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Layla. The next question, at what point in the approval process is the NDC published in the database?
So that's a good question. And it brings up a good point, actually, because so we mentioned, the NDC is required to be assigned to all drugs, right? So for example, OTCs are not even, some OTC drugs are not, or most of OTC drugs are not subject to drug approval, right? But they still have to be listed with FDA. They still have to be assigned an NDC. So for approved drugs that go through the FDA approval process, as you know, there are several different steps, and in final phases, the labeling actually is developed and approved. As part of labeling submission to FDA, applicants typically include an NDC or at least a placeholder for the NDC under drug label. What is very important to keep in mind is that the NDC itself is not reviewed and approved during the drug approval process. So that's a very important factor that all applicants have to bear in mind. The NDC placement is reviewed on a drug label or in the House supplied section. If you have a prescription drug application, the packaging configurations, for example, are being reviewed and approved. But the NDC itself, in terms of if it is the correct length, if it is the correct format, if it has not been reused, from a previously listed drug, as we mentioned, those are not actually being looked at. So what we try to recommend to applicants is that they do check with our group if they have any NDC questions during the drug approval process. And again, that email address is edrls@fda.hhs.gov. Or not to really move away from the subject here, but there is also an NDC reservation option available for drugs that are in development and are not approved and ready for launch yet. So that submission to FDA includes very minimal requirements in terms of what kind of data you need, because the drug is not approved yet. So you may not have, for example, your proprietary name approved yet. So it includes just very few data elements. And you basically reserve the NDC to make sure that initial validation for the NDC passes. And so therefore, you can actually use that NDC to then list your drug after approval and once you start commercial distribution. And that NDC reservation document can later on develop and further revise to actually change to a listing submission, which then takes care of your listing requirements and labeling submission requirements after approval.
Thank you, Layla. All right, next question. Do compounded drugs have NDC numbers?
So compounded drugs is a completely different area. It's a whole different office that work actually on compounded drugs. So I don't want to really get into the requirements for compounded drugs, but they can be assigned NDCs. From my understanding, they do not need to provide it to FDA at the time of their reporting, but that's a completely different area, and there is an office that oversees that.
Thank you, Layla. All right, so let's do a couple more. Can you go over when does the NDC format change again?
We don't know yet. Stay tuned if it does. So again, it's a proposed rule and it's being finalized. And we will publish the information as soon as actually it is finalized. And so therefore you have a lot more clarity on what to expect. And I will also add, for those of you that are interested in actually receiving that information, is that once an agency is going to publish a rule, we have to actually publish a notice in a Federal Register website. So if you are interested in getting those information or notification, you have to sign up at federalregister.gov, which includes Federal Register notice email notifications, which you can subscribe to.
Okay, thanks, Layla. That was the second question. The next question coming in: how will I know when the NDC final rule is published? So again, make sure you are going on the Federal Register and getting notifications, like Layla just said. Okay, maybe two more questions. Should we report a drug that we cannot find any records for on the NDC directory?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, because we do have ways to find those products. A drug that is in the U.S. commercial distribution without being listed with FDA can potentially be misbranded. So if you have a drug in your possession, you are dispensed the medication, you have it in your possession and you don't find a drug listing for it on any of the publications mentioned in this presentation, please reach out to us and report it. And we will look into it.
Okay, we'll take our final question since we're almost at the 2 o'clock mark. If a drug is discontinued from the market, can its NDC be assigned to another drug?
No, so as mentioned, with the 2016, sorry, registration and listing regulation that was revised at the time and went into effect in 2017. And unlike previous practices, because it was allowed under the old regulations, with the new one, the reuse of the NDC for a different drug is no longer allowed because it created a lot of issues. Once an NDC is out there assigned to a certain drug, that information can remain in the downstream databases forever. And there is no way for FDA to alert those, outside of FDA databases or correct them. And therefore, to avoid medication errors, FDA stopped that practice. Unless, again, as I mentioned, if a drug is discontinued and comes back in the market exactly the same way as it was, then the same NDC has to be assigned. But if not, it cannot be assigned to any other drug ever.
All right. Thank you so much, Layla. That was a great presentation, very informational. If you have questions, please email them to our Division of Drug Information email address at druginfo@fda.hhs.gov for assistance. If you need more CEs for your license renewals this year, please check out our list of home study CE webinars on our homepage, www.fda.gov/DDI webinars. This concludes our activity for today. The FDA appreciates your participation in this webinar, and we hope that you will join us again in the future. Thank you all for attending, and please stay safe and healthy at the start of this holiday season. Thanks, everyone. Take care.